This video is from April 22nd, when Adam and I drove to Raleigh and went to the Van Gogh Immersive exhibit, and I want to take you along. Let's go. Hey folks, I'm in the car. I'm on the way to Raleigh with Adam. We have tickets and have had tickets for months to see the Van Gogh interactive exhibit that's on tour all over the place. And it's in Raleigh. This is for Adam's birthday, so it's kind of a big deal. And I started reading online. It was hard to find out what venue this exhibit was at. Finally, I found the venue. Then I started reading reviews saying, oh, it's not open yet. It's not open yet. People were showing up with their tickets on the day they were supposed to go through the exhibit and found that the doors were closed and the exhibit had never opened yet. They didn't even have their permits in place to open the exhibit for the public. And these are news reports happening 2 days ago and yesterday, people showing up yesterday. So I told Adam this morning, we're sitting there sipping our coffee, and I said, I don't want to drive all the way to Raleigh. This is like a 3-hour drive, and find out that the place is closed. So I did finally find a way to email the vendor who's doing the exhibit. And I heard back from them within, 15 minutes saying, yes, it's open today. Apparently today is the first day the exhibit has been open in Raleigh. We're taking them at their word, because if we don't go and they are open, then we just lose our tickets. So we have to go. We're going to go to a leather store because Adam wants to get some more leather for some of his craft projects. Guess what? It's open. So we're going to be going in. If I can video inside, I will. We're so happy that it's open. It's Vincent and me. Van Gogh loved Japanese art and was inspired by it, so they had a little serving of Japanese tea in the lobby when we first got there. That was really fun. This is one of the early exhibits. The entire exhibition was in 3 parts, and the first part was to expose the guest to his art and be familiar with his life. So that first was a bust of him. These are sunflowers. These are all probably pretty familiar to you. Now, these, of course, are not originals or anything. They're just copies that they were able to get. This is my favorite one. This is the Parisian Cafe. I ended up loving that one the most, I think. But the first part of the exhibit, you had background music that was kind of somber and sad, and you had some voiceovers from Vincent speaking in his letters. Now, this vase was in a small room surrounded by black curtains. It was a huge vase, probably, 4 feet tall. And then the wall was full of flowers. It was a light display. And they would shine these moving video lights on there to change the flowers that were in the vase. It was mesmerizing, relaxing. The whole exhibit, even with all the people there, was quiet. It was like being in a museum. Everybody was really watching and talking in very low voices. So even though I say it was kind of a light show, it was very quiet and very beautiful. And I love the creativity that the designers used to show not just his art, but also his mind. Van Gogh was a complicated man with mental illness and so much talent, and he had so much failure in his life that it's easy to just look at how famous he is and forget that he had a pretty tragic life. So Adam and I sat in this little room for quite a while watching this. And then we moved on to more of the first stage of the exhibit. They had some wonderful quotes by him. If you hear a voice within you say you cannot paint, then by all means paint. Paintings have a life of their own that originates in the mind of the painter. And here is his famous room in Arles. And they also had a full-scale mock-up of it. That's a full-size bed. They have images of the 3 different versions of the room that he painted, showing the kind of change in his mood and his mind. And then we went to the second stage, and this was, I think, my favorite. This was the actual immersive exhibit. This was a massive room the size of a soccer field, and all four walls, way, way up, probably 40 feet up, was all this visual display. It's all his artwork, but they made it move. They made the boats move and the stars twinkle and the reflections in the water. And then they had these, they would move from one part of his life to the next. So this is the art in one part of his life, but then you'll see this building kind of slowly emerge in front of it, where I think he stayed in Arles, in the sanatorium he was in. This was also so mesmerizing. There were probably 50 people at least in there while we were there, sitting in these loungy chairs and on beanbags on the floor. The lights also shone onto the floor. Here's the Japanese flowers falling, just beautiful. I just want you to imagine this huge wall, all four walls around you. I turned my chair to one end of this room so that I didn't have any people in between me and the walls. Except for there's Adam over there on the edge. I probably should have gotten the entire room for you so you could see how big it was, but I was focused on just getting the art. I kind of wish they could have done it on the ceiling as well. I'll show you in a second how they had the images, the shadows of them skirting across the floor. That was very fun. You went in there, it lasted about 35 minutes, but you could stay as long as you wanted. If we'd stayed in there for 2 hours, nobody would have minded. They had people at the entrances, but everybody was very quiet and very gracious. So I think we stayed in there for at least one rotation of this part of the exhibit, if not more. Oh, this was so beautiful. These are his wheat fields during harvest. See, there's the corner of the room you can see. And so they have the trains moving, the tractors moving, the birds flying. And then there's Adam sitting. And see how they have it also on the floor? That's one of the chairs that we sat in. So the idea is really to put you into his artwork, to immerse you in it so that you felt like what it felt like to be in his mind as he's creating this art. And that's a fascinating idea. Instead of just observing art from a distance, to actually step into the painting yourself and have it begin to move. And Adam and I both just loved this. There's the beanbag floors. And the last part of the exhibit was, how do I describe it? You put on this monitor on your eyes and it actually walks you. It's even more immersive. You feel like you're actually walking through the scenes of his paintings. I was able to walk up to that Parisian cafe and really look at it. It was very difficult though to keep a mask on your face, and the thing that they put on your eyes, I forget what they call it, the little visual thing. It's like a pair of binoculars or something. Anyway, it's a 3D thing. Mine was smudgy on the glass, on the lenses, and so I couldn't focus and tried to put my glasses on with it. But I thought that was wonderful. So I cleaned them and put it back on and watched it a second time. And I love this. See how his trees are swaying. It was so relaxing. And then they had a wonderful gift shop afterward. Adam bought some cufflinks, and I bought a necklace that had, I think, this same image on the necklace. This is perhaps one of his favorite, most famous. It was just wonderful. I love these boats. The rest of this video is going to be of me painting a sunflower watercolor. So if you want to spend a half hour or 20 minutes watching me do that, then continue. If not, this is a good time to click away. Thanks so much for going with us on this wonderful trip. It was a whole lot of fun. Good morning, YouTube world. Well, I've been outside and done some chicken work and some farm work or yard work. Worn myself out a bit, so now I'm going to paint and try to rest and slow down. So I've got out my painting stuff, such as it is. I'm going to do a slightly larger piece instead of a card. I'm doing a 9 by 12. I sell these at the market too, and I'm going to do a big, beautiful sunflower. Maybe I'll post a picture for just a second of one that I've done as a commission that turned out really well. So I'm going to kind of use that as a gauge. I have put this makes it easier to manage. I could probably paint this on the table, but I like to have it on here when it's a little bigger. So I'm putting it on this piece of board that we bought at the hardware store. I have this size and a slightly smaller one. And then I'm going to use this, here it is, this brown tape that you wet on one side. Gummed watercolor paper tape. I ordered it online. Don't use it real often, but it's really good for holding things down. Now I want to leave just a trim of a border around the outside, so I don't want to overlap this too much. Anyway, and so I'll bring you back and maybe let you watch a little bit of the painting as I go along once I remember how to do this. All right, so that's what's happening this morning in my studio. Now I want just a little bit of white border around the edge, but I need to know, because this tape, when I lay it down, I don't know how much of the edge I'm covering up. So that's why I like this clear ruler. So I'm going around the edge of my paper, and this has these little teeny marks, and so I'm picking not the shortest one, but I think the next to the shortest mark to line up. And then I'm taking a watercolor pencil that is the closest color I have to what the background's going to be, which is going to be yellow and gold and orange, all the colors. Barely see that, of the sunflower petals. So this paint, this tape is just a little tricky. So it likes to misbehave. I have one of these little spongy things, and you don't want to get any droplets really on your paper at this point. Okay, so this is now ready to go, and I'm going to sketch first, which is not always necessary with watercolor. Sometimes you don't have to, but with this one, I do like to get the center of the sunflower placed correctly, have room for the stem, make sure I've got the right proportions. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll get back to you. Okay, my sketch is done so far. Really all I need is the blue center, and I went ahead and did the stem just to give me just a feel for how things are. All of the petals, it's a little bit higher than I would have preferred, but I think I'm going to stick with it because I can have the petals running off the page, and that's fine. I'm not going to spend as much time on each individual petal as I did on the commission that I did, because that was a much more detailed piece, and I sold it for a lot more. So I had to let every petal dry and used all kinds of purple and stuff. But I am going to have fun with this. So now we get down to painting. This is Grumbacher paper. And I'll be interested to see. I know it's ridiculous, but I prefer Canson watercolor paper because that's what I first started painting on. as far as just pads of paper. And so I got used to how it behaved. And I don't know, but we'll see what we think about this. I think I'm going to avoid, no, I could put a little bit of something deeper in the base. I like layers of petals, and so I go around and do the front ones first, actually, and then put the secondary ones in behind later. The other thing I could use at the bottom also is a little bit of brown, kind of a red brown. That would work as well. Honestly, in the one that I did for that commission, I have some really dark, yeah, that must be a very dark brown. Maybe even some black in there. It's very interesting. Okay. Get a little teeny bit of, let me see. I like to have all kinds of different shapes of petals. Make sure this is wet enough to maintain all of that pigment that I put down to keep it moving. I don't want it to dry. So this is a cadmium yellow I'm using on the tip of these. And I don't know what kind of red that is. I think it's just a basic red. It's not matte or anything. And then nice orange in the middle to kind of get those two to blend well. And then as far as the dark stuff on the bottom, it's a little bit of violet purple mixed with some Payne's Gray. Payne's Gray is a wonderful paint. It's important to remember that you're going to want a contrast between these front petals and the ones behind, which will be more primarily yellow, even a little bit of lemon yellow. Okay. And the lemon yellow is what I'm kind of using to lay down the shape of the petal. I dropped a drop somewhere. Oh, it was on the edge. Okay, well, you've seen me do a handful of these, so you probably don't need to see me do all of them. That would be good napping video is what I would call that. I wonder if I should let's just do an orange. Avoid the red this time. See, I was too aggressive with that orange. Maybe a little bit of this. What do you think about that? Okay. All right, well, I'm going to keep at this, and maybe I'll fast forward some of it so you can watch it appear. It is a little bit wet, but that's what it's looking like so far. right, I've got my second layer of petals on, and I'm going to do one more layer. And the important thing to remember as you're painting these is you want some type of contrast between any two petals that touch each other, okay? So if I have a red before, I'm going to use an orange, or if I have some kind of an orange, then I might use a light yellow. A good example of that is right here, how the tip of that petal is a light yellow, and so I made sure that I came in with kind of a darker browny red around it to make that front one really stand out. You don't need every single one to stand out like that, but a few will really give some depth to your painting. Some of the things that I liked that the watercolor did, I really like these little peaks right here. I really, really like what it did right here. The bleeding in between the two kind of just stopped. Isn't that nice? So this is coming along pretty well. I'm going to do all the petals and I'll do all the petals, and then I'll do the blue center, which is the most nervous time because you have to act really fast because you have to lay it on and put salt on it and hope for the best result when you do the salt. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the next lighter yellow layer and work for some more contrast. I'm going to fill the top, most of this, and have some trailing down here. And then the background will maybe be, I don't know, maybe a pale green or a little bit of yellow. I don't know what I'm going to do on the background yet. There won't be a lot of background. There'll be some over here, though. And I'll bring you back later, okay? I have my third layer of petals in now, and they're drying. You can see I've got quite a tip of liquid right there. It's a wonder of watercolor. As long as the paper around it is dry, that liquid won't go anywhere. It'll only travel where it's wet. So now I'm tilting it to go back up. I should have mentioned, I know I held up this brush, but this brush is so useful for cutting, and this is called a dagger brush, and I ordered it online, I think, because I couldn't find a store that had it around here. Okay, so I'm pretty pleased with this so far. I think you can see how even though the ones that had the purple and stuff and the Payne's Gray looked pretty scary when you put them on, put the pigment on, they really look pretty good now. So, but I like the combination of all different kinds of petals. I don't think they should be uniform, and that's what I find so creative, is that every single one is different. So I'm going to let this really dry for a bit and take a little break, walk around, go outside, and I might tilt that so that that runs up. And then I'll come back and work on it later. All right, time for the next stage. It's nice and dry. I've got a combination of ultramarine blue and peacock blue, peacock green, some kind of peacock. These are all Mission Gold watercolors. And so I'm going to be using that in the middle. Now the thing I have to do is, again, I'm going to use this dagger brush because I have to cut into these little green fronds that are here, and I'm going to wet the whole thing. The temptation for me anyway is to overdo it and get it too wet. And then when I put the pigment on, I put too much of that, and then I just have this little lake. And if you do that, then the salt is not going to work well. So you have to really keep it all wet, but just minimally wet, that almost the least amount possible. So although I'm going to put some water on first, just a little bit, not much, just dampen the paper so that when I do put the pigment on, which is also wet, that it won't go crazy with moisture. Okay, I'm going to turn you around and let you watch me do this. I hope it works okay. Sometimes salt does well, and sometimes it doesn't. We'll put the salt right here so I can get to it easily. Oh, I've already got some blue on there. Goodness. Okay, well, that won't hurt anything. If you have a little bit of color when you're laying down water, it just helps you to know where you've been. The reason I have some pigment already in my brush is because I was using this brush to mix up those two paints I was referring to. You want to get it to the edge. You can come back in later and tidy up a lot of these edges. I'm going to come back in with a yellow toward the end, a little pale yellow, and get rid of all these little white spots between petals. You do want this blue center to go all the way to the edge of the petals, but you can come back later and tidy it up. Okay, everything is still a little bit moist. I'm going to come back in with the pigment, and it will, I don't have to cut it in too carefully because it will drift wherever it's wet. This paint will go. Now if I see that it's starting to dry too fast, then I'll go ahead and put the salt on it. Cutting in around those little green petals is not so hard as making sure that your edge is nice. I really do want a good bit of pigment here. So I want this center to be nice and dark. Oh man, almost made a big boo-boo. Nice thing about watercolors is if you dribble a dot of paint in a spot you don't want on your white paper, you can use very clear water and go in there and scrub it out and lift it off. See, some of these are already starting to dry, but I'm not so worried about the little petals in the middle as this part. Now let's get a little bit more color there. Okay. You also, if you don't have too much liquid, then you don't need, you're not tempted to put on so much salt. You really just want a sprinkle of salt. You want space between the salt pieces. I've learned over time that the salt does best on portions that are just a little bit, because the salt kernels, whatever you want to call these, salt particles, they can only absorb so much liquid. And if you put them where there's too much liquid, then they have difficulty. They absorb it, but the paper still stays wet because they can't absorb it all. That's what I've got right now. Okay, see how this is kind of too damp? Yeah, I have to let that dry entirely. And again, you can see that there's little places where there's some white showing through, and I'm going to go back when it's all the way dry at the very end and fill in some of these with a very teeny number 2 brush. But we've got a long way to go before we get there. Okie dokie. So I went ahead and did the background in a very pale green, and I used 4 different kinds of green. I used olive, sap, viridian, and even a little bit of indigo to just give, I don't know, just a more complicated wash on the back. But I didn't want it to obscure the flower or the stem. The stem will be green too, probably mostly olive and hooker's green. Now, the salted portion in the middle, I am cautiously optimistic that that's going to turn out well. There's been some movement in there of the blue, that's what you really want, is not just for the salt to just absorb it, but it needs to pull that pigment and make it move in little washy ways. I'm really excited about that, but you have to wait till it's absolutely dead dry before you start taking it off. I'm going to go ahead and do the stem. The thing you have to be careful of is that blue has to be dry enough before you do the stem. You don't want any contamination between the two, any running. The only running spot that I'm going to have to go back and fix is right down here. See that? But I think I can do that with a little damp brush. I can blend that in and it'll be fun. Matter of fact, I'll show that to you again, and then I'll show it to you later after I've fixed it, and we'll see what you think about that little repair. Okay, I did the stem. I like the shape. You see, I did have some bleeding into the blue there. Got some, especially down here on the bottom, two little pokey things in the middle. I'm hoping that when I take off the salt, and it didn't really bleed into, the pigment in the blue was not wet. It was the salt that grabbed it and absorbed it, which was my mistake. I probably should have taken the salt off too before I did the stem, but I know you find this shocking to hear, but I was a little impatient. So anyway, so we're going to wait for this all to dry and then see if I can get that green. Oh, let me show you the repair though. Where was the repair? Oh, I think it was right. I don't know if you can see it at all. I don't think I can see it. See, the repair's gone. So maybe I'll be able to do a little bit of repair on the other as well. These sunflowers have been very popular. No matter if I do it on a card or a big one, they really sell quickly. People love it. And now with the whole thing in Ukraine, people love sunflowers even more. Yeah, I'm liking that a lot. It has a very, that looks like a sunflower with a hairdo. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of dabbing at it like painters do and fiddling with this and that. So, and then I'll show you. I'm going to take it off. Now, see, I made a mistake. I do this all the time. I wanted that white edge around there, and then I taped over it. Well, this brown stuff is not going to come off that, so I'm going to have to cut it off, and it's going to have a brown edge around the edge, which, yeah, whoever frames it is going to have to just cover that up. But hopefully they'll like it anyway. All right. Well, such as it is, there it is. Well, there it is. I think previous sunflowers maybe have been darker, although I don't think that it's showing as dark on the camera as it actually is, the petals, I mean. So I think that the blue turned out pretty well. Not as good as some I've done, but better than others. So I'll be taking this off and taking it to the farmer's market on Saturday and see if anybody likes it. Thanks for joining me for this little painting project. I hope you liked it.